Welcome to the Economist in Your Ear podcast. Let's start with a thought. If 40% of the working population in the world's largest economy suddenly relied on flexible, temporary, and often, well, precarious employment, how quickly would that shift reshape your life, your career, and your country's future? That's really the core question posed by the transformation happening in China right now. We're looking at this huge, rapid rise of a flexible workforce. It reaches a staggering 200 million people. It's a move away from the traditional industrial proletariat toward, well, what some sociologists are calling the precariat, workers whose instability is their defining economic feature.
That transformation is absolutely critical. And it's not just a China story, is it? What we're witnessing is, I think, an advanced preview of what happens globally when two powerful forces collide. You've got technology that de-skills traditional labor on one hand, and on the other, employers who are, frankly, desperate for instant operational flexibility. So we really need to examine what China's experience reveals about the future of jobs everywhere. And maybe more importantly, where the sort of prevailing global wisdom on this whole shift might be missing the mark.
Right. That's our mission today. We'll unpack the sheer scale of this change, look specifically at how this flexible labor model is, maybe surprisingly, creeping onto the factory floor. And most importantly, explore the critical policy gaps that other countries, particularly those rapidly developing economies in Asia, really need to learn from and avoid. Okay, let's dig into the scale first. That 200 million figure, 40% of China's urban workforce, it's massive, but it's an aggregate number, isn't it? It kind of mashes together very different realities. So what exactly are we counting when we hear that headline figure?
It's absolutely crucial to use two distinct lenses here. You've got the official government count, which focuses strictly on platform-mediated workers. So that's your ride-hailing drivers, your food couriers, people earning income pretty much entirely through an app. That number alone is substantial. It clocks in around 84 million.
84 million. Just the platform workers. That's already larger than the entire workforce of many, many countries.
Exactly. It's huge in its own right. But the 200 million figure, that's the upper bound estimate. And this number intentionally casts a much wider net. It pulls in millions of off-platform, flexible, and temporary roles that exist totally outside the big apps.
Like what sort of roles?
Well, construction day laborers, people in informal services, and critically, this growing number of short-term factory temps who are often managed by, traditional labor brokers, not apps.
Yeah.
If we treat that 84 million platform group and the broader 200 million flexible group as the same thing, we end up designing the wrong policies. They need different approaches.
And the bit that really jumped out at me from the sources was how deeply this flexibility has now penetrated manufacturing. We usually think gig work, we think delivery riders, right, in the big cities. But the research estimates that roughly 40 million of these flexible roles are actually short-term, low-skill assignments in the manufacturing sector itself.
That 40 million figure is just staggering. To put that in context for listeners, that's more than 3 times the size of America's total manufacturing workforce. And they're operating mostly on short-term contracts, often day-to-day.
Why? Why the factory floor? Why is this happening now?
It seems to be a combination of, management strategy and automation's impact. On the strategy side, you have these global supply chains. Firms need to scale up production or scale it down almost instantly. Sometimes that's driven by a trade dispute, a sudden holiday rush, maybe shifting export rules. Short-term labor is their quick fix.
Okay, so it gives them that agility.
Exactly. And then on the automation side, technology has taken over many of the complex tasks, the ones that needed skilled technicians. So what's often left are these gaps in, say, basic assembly, packaging, quality inspection, jobs that require really minimal training. Sometimes, as the research notes, literally just needing knowledge of the Roman alphabet to follow instructions on a screen. It's quite something.
So technology has simplified the jobs to the point where a sort of revolving door of temporary labor can fill them easily. It sounds incredibly precarious for the workers involved. Yet we also see data suggesting this type of work provides a necessary, maybe even vital cushion for some.
It does, yeah. It often absorbs economic shocks. We see research, for instance, showing that nearly 77% of ride-hailing drivers surveyed said they entered the industry specifically after losing their previous job, often a more stable one.
Wow, over 3/4.
Right. So for a huge segment of the population, especially during downturns or transitions, the real alternative isn't necessarily a better job with full benefits waiting somewhere else. It might be no work at all. The platforms, for all their issues, offer immediate income visibility. And that buffer against, total destitution is a genuine societal benefit that we have to acknowledge.
That's a vital point to keep in mind. Okay, so the common narrative around this shift, it often leads to certain conclusions, sometimes quite alarmist ones, but the analysis suggests we really need to push back on some of that framing, add some nuance. Let's look at three key areas where the standard arguments maybe need a bit more context. First, there's this big question. Is manufacturing dead? We often hear the lesson, particularly for developing nations, don't bet on factory jobs because automation will just de-skill them, turn them into temp work.
Yet that framing is, I think, far too simplistic. And it risks encouraging countries to abandon what's historically been the most important engine of development. The danger isn't the existence of factories themselves. The real danger is the lack of training ladders within those factories when management decides to switch almost entirely to temporary workers. You see, when firms replace stable, skilled workers who learn on the job with a constant revolving door of temps who get minimal training, they destroy that fundamental mechanism that built the middle class across Asia.
So the problem isn't the factory building, it's the management approach refusing to see labor as a long-term investment worth developing.
Precisely. So the policy solution isn't, oh, discourage industry. It's actually to demand that firms invest in things like apprenticeships, accredited upskilling programs. Governments could, for example, tie business subsidies or tax benefits directly to maintaining good, stable factory jobs that explicitly include skill development pathways.
And the social cost of not doing that, of ignoring that training gap in China, especially for the younger generation who've often migrated from rural areas, it seems enormous.
Oh, it's a critical demographic issue. It's almost like a time bomb. Without recognized certifiable skills, these young, flexible workers face really severe long-term difficulties settling in their new urban homes. They struggle to integrate. They often can't access basic public services like schooling for their kids or proper health care because of the strict hukou system, my household registration.
Right, the FUCA system ties benefits to your official place of residence, which is often still their rural hometown.
Exactly. So if they can't properly settle, they struggle to marry, start families, become part of the urban fabric. And that ultimately just makes China's already severe aging population crisis even worse. It starts as an economic issue, but quickly spirals into a really profound social stability challenge.
Okay, let's pivot to the second common argument we need to examine. Does regulation actually matter? There's often the cynicism, isn't there, suggesting that government efforts to control these huge platforms are just, well, performative, just window dressing that the algorithms ultimately ignore.
Yeah, that view, I think, significantly underestimates both the power and the potential template being created by Beijing's recent interventions. China's rulemaking actually matters more than is often recognized globally, and is providing a potentially crucial roadmap for how you manage the impact of this technology. Since 2022, Beijing has moved specifically to curb what they call algorithmic scheduling abuses.
Can you give us a concrete example? What does algorithmic abuse actually mean for, say, a delivery driver on the ground?
Well, it means the algorithm essentially becomes a cruel taskmaster. The pressure to meet near-impossible delivery deadlines, for instance, which pushes drivers to speed, skip meals, or skip crucial rest periods. That's the abuse. Beijing's guidelines, and importantly, the subsequent implementation efforts by the platforms themselves, have targeted this directly. They issued new directives in 2024 pushing platforms toward clearer pay floors, guaranteed rest breaks between shifts, and crucially, making moves towards mandatory Social Security participation. These aren't just symbolic gestures, they are tangible levers. They show that algorithmic management can be challenged and shaped by state regulation. And that's a lesson that developing Asia in particular should absolutely be looking to copy and adapt.
Right. And finally, the third nuance, the myth of easy portability. We hear this all the time, don't we? Oh, the solution is simple. Just make benefits portable. Make retirement funds or insurance. Follow the worker from gig to gig, platform to platform.
Making benefits portable is, conceptually, absolutely the right goal. It has to be part of the solution. But, and this is a big but, it is notoriously difficult to actually execute effectively in practice. So while you see some large platforms in China, like the food delivery giant Meituan, running pilot programs for social insurance contributions, the coverage remains pretty patchy. It's limited across that vast 200 million flexible workforce. We only have to look at the challenges faced trying to do this elsewhere to see how hard it is.
You mean like the example in India you mentioned?
Exactly. India created the eShram registry, a huge initiative, registering hundreds of millions of informal workers onto a central database. That's a massive achievement in terms of just lifting names. But the really critical next step, The actual delivery of benefits, ensuring mandatory contributions are made, enforcing the flow of money that lags significantly behind the registration part. Portability isn't just having a list of names. It requires mandatory, probably prorated, and audited money flows tied to every single shift or order or day worked. Without that robust enforcement mechanism, it risks remaining just a nice idea on paper.
Okay, so putting this all together, we've established the risk isn't just that gig work exists. It's the potential creation of these giant, complex, often quite opaque labor markets that operate without the necessary guardrails. If China's experience is a kind of preview, what's the smarter, more proactive roadmap for the rest of the world, especially for countries that still want to preserve some of that operational flexibility that makes gig work attractive to businesses in the first place?
I think we need a policy response that's built around three distinct but interconnected and achievable pillars. First, governments absolutely must, in time, define and segment the work much more clearly. We need to legally and statistically separate platform logistics. The couriers and drivers managed directly by an app's algorithm from temp manufacturing work, which is often managed by a traditional broker or agency.
Why is that separation so important?
Because the regulatory tools you need for a tech company managing schedules through an algorithm are likely different from the tools needed for a traditional labor outsourcing agency placing people in factories. We need specific data on each segment to regulate them effectively. You can't just treat them as one blob.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so define and segment first. What's the second pillar? This sounds like it gets into the financial architecture.
It does. That's mandatory portable benefits. Governments need to mandate the creation of individual Social Security accounts. These accounts must be legally required to follow the worker across every platform and every agency they might work for during their career. And then, this is key, require automatic prorated contributions into these accounts. Maybe per shift, per order completed, or per day worked, depending on the sector. This fundamentally shifts the social contract, doesn't it? Your safety net is no longer tied to having one long-term employer. It's tied directly to you, the worker, however fragmented your work life becomes.
Okay, mandatory portable accounts with automatic contributions. And the third pillar, this seems to move beyond just the safety net and focuses more on future prosperity, tackling that de-skilling issue.
Exactly. The third pillar is absolutely essential for countering the de-skilling trend we talked about. Governments need to reward training, not just churn. How? Well, they could offer things like tax credits or maybe significantly lower employer Social Security contribution rates, but only when platforms or agencies demonstrably fund accredited training programs. And critically, this training must lead to verifiable skill badges or certifications that are recognized across the industry.
What does a verifiable skill badge actually look like in practice? Is it like a digital certificate?
It could be, yes. Something like an independently verified digital certificate stored on a blockchain, maybe. Proof that a factory temp has genuinely mastered, say, a certain level of advanced machine maintenance, or perhaps that a driver has completed specialized training in electric vehicle battery safety or defensive driving in complex urban environments. The point is, it creates an incentive structure. It pushes the employer, whether it's a platform or an agency, to see the temp worker not just as a disposable cost center, but as a potential long-term asset they're actually mandated and rewarded for improving.
So this whole approach, you set a mandatory transparent floor for basics like minimum pay rates, guaranteed rest periods, but you still allow dynamic pricing for things like surge hours to keep that flexibility. It seems like it preserves the core aspects that made gig work grow so fast, but transforms it into something that looks less like pure precarity and maybe much more like a functioning 21st century safety net. It respects both the worker's need for income stability and the firm's need for agility.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
China is a warning, yes, about the potential downsides if this is left unregulated. But perhaps more powerfully, it's an urgent mandate for governments everywhere to act now, proactively. The future well-being of millions, potentially billions, of workers globally really hinges on getting these three things right. Implementing genuinely mandatory portable benefits, rebuilding effective training ladders even within temporary workplaces, and ensuring real accountability for the algorithms that manage so much of this work.
So the big question we're left with then, how quickly will these pilot programs we see in China and maybe elsewhere move from being, potentially just PR successes to becoming actual widespread embedded payroll deductions in 2025 and 2026 across Asia and beyond? And which Asian country maybe will be the first to truly integrate these kinds of skill-based rewards and verifiable skill badges directly into their platform work contracts on a large scale? That's really what we need to watch next.
Thanks for listening. Follow us for daily insights into world affairs, and don't forget to like, comment, and share.